Okay, hello everyone and welcome to yet another tactical analysis video. Now, the past few videos have been incredibly popular, so massive shout out to everyone who's newly subscribed to the channel as a result of wanting more of these videos. So, this video will be a short one, mainly because from a tactical point of view, it was a game full of individual errors, and really that helped create the brilliant spectacle of attacking football that was on show from both sides. But if you're a bit of a defensively minded type of person like me, you'd probably be able to acknowledge that a lot of the goals probably could have been prevented and probably would have been prevented on another day. Not to take anything away from the game though, because it really was kind of a get off your seat type of spectacle and great to watch if you're a neutral. However, it was also quite a stubborn game from a tactical standpoint. City refused to really change their philosophy, even when 4-1 down, but I'd at least like this video to highlight why this Liverpool side was capable of doing what many have wondered could be the impossible to do so far this season, as well as the tweaks Klopp clearly imposed on his side to give him the slight edge, with of course the Anfield 12th man behind them at home. As expected, both teams lined up with their favoured 4-3-3s, City seeing no reason to change a winning formula, and Klopp stuck to the obvious philosophy his side is built around, knowing that on the day, Liverpool's personnel could be capable of pulling off an upset. City's 4-3-3 that is tweaked per match depending on opposition strengths and weaknesses was significantly wider than that of Liverpool's narrow 4-3-3. The main difference being the movement of the City inverted fullbacks, Delph/Danilo more so on the left hand side than Kyle Walker on the right hand side, who was of course on his favoured foot, with both Delph and Danilo being right footed. And the Sané-Sterling combination were both hugging each touchline, trying to really stretch the pitch, occupy both wing backs to try and create more room centrally for the playmakers in Gundogan and De Bruyne, kind of like we saw City do early on in the season against Chelsea's wing backs. On the other hand, Liverpool's front three was a lot more narrower, and they focused more on occupying the central areas as they usually do within their gegenpress, but they do stretch wide when they require to do so, when you've got very versatile players like Salah, Mane and Firmino. Firmino was dropping deep quite a lot as well to drag Fernandinho with him, help link the midfield with the runs that Salah and Mane were of course making to try and abuse the Man City high line as well. So quite a versatile front three from Liverpool. So even though, yes, their shape was a little bit narrower, it did not mean whatsoever that they still didn't utilise the wide areas. Same goes for Man City's wide players, where we saw Sané obviously for his goal, which he took pretty damn well, cut inside, where he then made it 1-1 after putting the ball past Karius after a Joe Gomez error. Guardiola made sense to make the pitch as wide as possible, given Liverpool's high pressing game, giving Liverpool more ground to cover, tiring them out, and also aiming to take advantage of Joe Gomez's inclusion over on the right hand side of defence, whose mistake led to Sané's goal, regardless of Karius' poor protection of his front post. This would resultantly also drag Liverpool's players pressing out wide, out of position, and create more room for De Bruyne and Gundogan centrally. Klopp, on the other hand, came prepared. He knew City would be playing with a high line that Salah and Mane could exploit due to the space to be left behind both fullbacks going forward and the centre-backs in general. City have been adamant on playing out the back this season too, and the high line helps them retain possession, with most attacks starting by pivoting around Fernandinho, Ederson passing the ball out the back, or finding a fullback and moving the ball into the midfield towards the likes of De Bruyne or Silva, who sometimes drop deep to try and then find balls towards the deadly front three of Sané, Aguero and Sterling. To counter this, we saw City's fullbacks play narrower than usual to support Stones and Otamendi centrally from Liverpool's counter-attacks through the middle. Otherwise, it was basically at times always going to be a 2 versus 2 or a 3 versus 2 in favour of Liverpool, and Otamendi and Stones up against the pace of Salah, Mane and even Firmino was not going to be a pretty sight for Man City, and having Walker and Delph sit a little bit more narrower was obviously what helped protect Otamendi and Stones. And when one of the two fullbacks would venture forward, Fernandinho tried to also kind of provide extra protection for Otamendi and Stones up against the pace of Salah, Mane and Firmino. Klopp, on the other hand, came prepared. He knew City would be playing with a high line and that Salah and Mane could exploit that due to the space to be left behind both fullbacks and the centre-backs in general. Man City play quite a high line to help them retain possession in the opposition half. City have been adamant on playing out the back this season too, with most attacks starting with a pass out the back from Ederson by pivoting around Fernandinho, trying to find a fullback, or maybe Otamendi playing a pass into midfield or travelling with the ball. That's why Otamendi's managed the most. Well, so far, if you look at the leaderboards, he's got the most passes made in the Premier League, which is phenomenal for a centre-back. And trying to move the ball towards the midfield, towards those creative players in Silva, Gundogan or De Bruyne, regardless of whether they've dropped deep to pick the ball up, or whether that's a ball past the halfway line to get it into the final third, where they can then try and thread something through towards a deadly front three of the citizens. To counter this, we saw City's fullbacks play narrower than usual to try and support Otamendi and Stones centrally from Liverpool counter-attacks through the middle. This complemented Sané and Sterling, who were hugging each touchline to provide width up front. However, what City didn't realise was that it resultantly created space out in the wide areas to counter-attack into for Liverpool because of how much more narrower the Man City back four became, and because of how high up the pitch Sané and Sterling were, how high and wide they were, and the lack of tracking back we saw from both Gundogan and De Bruyne. So for this exact reason, it wasn't unusual to see both the Ox and Wijnaldum supplement the front three with overlapping runs into kind of these half spaces. And like I said before, with Gundogan and De Bruyne not tracking back like we've seen them do a lot this season, the fullbacks would get dragged out wide to try and prevent the runs being made by these guys, which would still leave Firmino, Salah and Mane with Otamendi and Stones. But, as you can tell, even if Fernandinho drops back, when Firmino would drop deeper and Fernandinho would follow him, you've still essentially got two 1 versus 1 situations here, which from an attacking point of view has to favour Liverpool. So due to the support coming from the Ox and Wijnaldum, it meant that Liverpool did not have to necessarily provide urgency from their fullbacks, which allowed them to focus on the counter-attacking pivots that were Sterling and Sané for Manchester City, as well as generally allow Liverpool to remain a little bit more defensively stable against the City side, who too are very good counter-attackers. When Liverpool did send a fullback forward, the opposite side would always stay back. Firmino's off-the-ball movement, dropping deep and generally playing as somewhat of a false nine, was also very important in occupying Fernandinho and really preventing him from being able to help Otamendi and Stones as much as we've seen him do this season, which promoted the idea of two 1v1 battles between each City centre-back and Salah/Mane, as we saw occur over the entire 90 minutes. It's also why there was an emphasis on balls over the top and through balls, because we all knew who'd win a race between Salah or Mane and Stones. But then again, given that Firmino managed to push Stones off the ball for Liverpool second, let's just say it was a day to forget for John Stones, the ex-Everton player. A lot of post-match talk was about Liverpool's high pressing, but it was a tactical press. It wasn't running around like headless chickens for the sake of it, and it wasn't with as much of a high intensity as we're perhaps used to seeing from a typical gegenpress. It was clearly a defensive plan. The pitch was split into sections. Klopp knew City was stubborn and would constantly look to do what they've done all season and play the ball out of the back after splitting the centre-backs. They then aimed to get the ball to either the pivot in the form of Fernandinho to spread play, or a fullback if Otamendi himself can't play a pass. In fact, both Otamendi and Fernandinho have the highest number of passes made in the Premier League so far this season. Klopp knew if he could disrupt City early on in building up their attacks, it would then starve their front players. Secondary, as one of the advantages of pressing the opposition in their own half, it's that you win the ball back closer to the goal you want to score in, with less opposition players to dodge through, and therefore you increase the possibility of mounting an attack of your own once winning it back. Unfortunately though, with that kind of form of pressing the opposition high up the field, comes defensive problems, which we'll take a look at in a bit. For more information and detail, check out my Jurgen Klopp tactical analysis video from last year on my channel. The link will also be in the description. So when Man City would try to build their attacks out the back, which they were very, very stubborn about, when it was clear that, I mean, surely they should have had the foresight to see that it was always going to be tough to do it in the first place, because Liverpool's style of play is very different to most other teams in the Premier League who play with just one striker, if you get where I'm coming from. So the gegenpress would commence where, instead of pushing fullbacks forward straight into the opposition half, taking that gamble, taking that risk and cutting out the passing lanes and leaving space behind for Sterling and Sané to exploit, like we saw Spurs do where they suffered, and we did a tactical analysis video of the City versus Spurs match, again link in the description. The front three of Salah, Firmino and Mane would all intensely close down the player with the ball, and resultantly also make it significantly more difficult for the ball to go anywhere through the close channels to the fullback or Fernandinho. And the sheer amount of pace and intensity on those front three made it very, very difficult for, in this case, Otamendi to really play the ball anywhere except back to Ederson. The Ox and Wijnaldum would also push forwards and stay tight to Gundogan and De Bruyne within this kind of scenario. So as we can see really shown here, Can would have one eye on Fernandinho and wouldn't hesitate to push forward if he needed to. But in this scenario here where the centre-backs kind of split, in the scenario where the ball is played to Otamendi, he's then normally left with two options. Now when you've only got one opposition striker closing you down, it usually leaves you with a triangle where you at least have one passing option, or if one of these guys comes deep, another passing option. These deeper guys are already cut off due to the position or the man tight marking that the Ox and Wijnaldum were always doing. Obviously, a direct ball forward to Walker was an option, but that's far too risky for Otamendi. With Salah coming from his right-hand side, the thing is, instead of him really trying to jockey and kind of intercept where the pass may occur, the idea is just to close the player down. If you can put the player down under pressure and reduce the gap between you and the player, regardless of where the opposition player is, for him to get the ball past all these feet coming towards him is going to be very, very difficult. And Mane in this case would have also the foresight based off the movement of his opposition as to whether to close down the channel between Ederson and Otamendi. Obviously, you can do that by closing down Otamendi, if that makes sense, or whether to close down the channel between Fernandinho and Otamendi. But in this case, it would make sense to simply close down Otamendi, and in the process, you're also closing down the passing channel to Ederson. Firmino also closing down from there would make it incredibly difficult to get the ball to Stones, and Salah's really the guy cutting off the pass to Delph, which really puts Otamendi under loads and loads and loads of pressure. So the Ox and Wijnaldum would stay tight to De Bruyne and Gundogan, so they can't get the ball either. And if you look at the positions of tackles won throughout the game, it's evident this was very effective. Most of the tackles won throughout the game were red tackles. A tactical press emanating from a gegenpress, but not with the same fluidity as a whole team that you'd normally expect from a gegenpress and the same level of risk. But because of how Liverpool usually play, it was quite simple for them to apply this slight variation of it. So unlike a gegenpress that would probably occur intensely all over the pitch, and in this kind of case even see some of the midfielders actually get involved, which would leave you more open at the back. Once City would enter the second section of the pitch, this triggered something very different to what we're perhaps used to seeing under Klopp at Liverpool. The back four would become compact, narrow, sit deep, often in their own box at times. If you go back and watch the match, you'll see what I'm talking about, with Can ironically almost becoming a third centre-back like Fernandinho does for City. And that's not really uncommon territory for Can, because he did used to play centre-back a few years ago, but he can also play in midfield. Salah would draw out wide and provide pace defensively against Sané and protect Gomez. And Mane would do the same, protecting Robertson, who had a very good game, by the way, against Sterling. With the shape becoming more of a 4-5-1 off the ball, throughout the game Liverpool picked their moments to press intelligently and also track back very well. Great cohesion, fluid movement and understanding between the front players and the midfielders. They pressed as a team when required and stood off as a team. It wasn't constant gegenpressing like some people want you to believe. Go back and watch the match. There was a clear defensive strategy by Jurgen Klopp's men employed. They pressed as a team when required and stood off as a team, making them very, very difficult to break down when needed, when they really needed to defend, when the likes of De Bruyne, Sane and so on were getting into the danger areas. This helped keep De Bruyne quiet centrally due to their narrow shape off the ball, which would then force the Belgian to basically go wide and try and cross the ball in instead. And we saw him try and basically go into the half spaces out wide, kind of between the central areas and out wide, obviously quite a lot. And we saw it twice almost actually lead to a City goal because of how good his delivery is, because he just is the complete player. One where Aguero missed the tap-in with kind of a whip ball into the box, and one in the second half where Otamendi should have really scored from a cross at the back post. But yeah, there were times where Salah and Mane were almost literally on the edge of their own box defending. It was a real hard-working performance, which in a way kind of makes you wonder how on earth Liverpool still managed to concede 3 goals. It's worth noting as well that the low block from Liverpool, being a counter-attacking team, also worked in their favour, as it baited City's fullbacks to also push forward and thus created lots of space, empty space rather, for Liverpool to play direct balls into and space for their fast players to run into. This is another reason why the Ox is so effective in Klopp's system despite playing a central role. Obviously being a winger or an ex-winger, whatever you want to call it, he possesses a lot of pace, and you link that with kind of the overlapping concept that I discussed earlier on, and it really emphasises why it is so important that these central players within this system are very athletic. We saw this happen less in the second half because of Liverpool's domination between the 55th and 70th minute, where City couldn't really get any rhythm going. Kind of because they refused to kick the ball upfield direct and instead just kind of gifted, in inverted commas, Liverpool goals. But full credit where it's due to Liverpool for working hard to earn them gifts. For me, there's no way Stones should be getting pushed off a ball for Firmino's goal, and as for Salah's goal, credit where it's due to Mane for closing down Walker, which triggered Ederson as a sweeper keeper to rush off his line and clear the ball. I think some of the goals that we saw in this match you shouldn't really try and look into too much, but rather look into it more from the perspective of what have City done so well this season and how did Liverpool manage to nullify that. But with the amount of quality City have in their side, and we saw that because they still managed to score 3 goals and still could have scored more, it makes you wonder whether or not City should have maybe tried to go a little bit more direct, which I don't necessarily think would have been a bad idea. Liverpool from time to time were playing direct balls forwards, and one thing Firmino and Mane were very good at doing was basically just causing Stones, Otamendi physical problems, and as a result of that, kind of the midfield for Liverpool was very, very efficient at winning second balls as well. So there's nothing wrong with going direct sometimes when you need to, especially when you're up against Liverpool's defence. Yes, Matip and Lovren are 2 big guys, but I'm pretty sure even Liverpool fans would kind of admit that the direct balls forwards have caused them problems this season and in the past, which is why they've paid so much money for Van Dijk to come in. And when I say causing problems, I obviously mean against some significantly weaker sides as well. So whether you want to kind of attribute Mane's goal as an Ederson error or a nice little detail from Mane in terms of his pressing and he got his reward, that's up to you. But regardless of the mistakes made by City and their adamance to keep playing out the back when they were clearly struggling to do so, the reason they were struggling to do so was thanks to how Liverpool set themselves up, for which they too deserve credit. City played average throughout the game, both teams had chances really, but with the supply lines cut off for De Bruyne and resultantly towards Aguero, who managed not an even single shot on target all game, not really his fault because even though he didn't manage a single shot on target all game, he played a massive, massive role in City's 2 final goals, and full credit where it's due to Sane for the first goal, even though it was kind of poor defending from Gomez and poor goalkeeping from Karius. I still think the fact that they scored 3 goals altogether sums up the defending as a whole by both sides in the match. As for City's 2 goals, they were both soft. There was no way Gundogan should have gone through as many Liverpool players as he did, but it was a nice 1-2 from Aguero regardless. And the second, I'm not quite sure how Aguero's lob/cross went over so many Liverpool players and was won by Gundogan in the box, instead of the red shirts in front of him, some of whom were like twice his size. Not literally, but you get the gist of my drift. So that's it for this video. I've tried to keep it short and sweet. It was one of those matches where we could go into more nitty-gritty details. But like I said, I've been ill, I've got a sore throat, and we'd be here all day. Because to be fair, I can probably talk about football all day. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching.